Speycasts are divided into two different types of casts. One are the waterborne casts and the other one are the airborne casts, or waterborne anchor casts and airborne anchor casts. Airborne anchor casts are casts where the line leaves the water, is airborne before it gets anchored, and waterborne casts are casts where the line might leave the water in order to get repositioned, but the final anchor is going to be produced from the water. So the nomenclature of the anchor groups relates to the location of the line prior to anchor formation. The name of the anchor is given by line location prior to anchor formation. And there is waterborne casts and airborne casts. And the easiest waterborne cast is, for example, this roll cast here. And in this roll cast and in these teachings of the roll cast, you have a mental picture like this here, where you pick up the line in one plane and where you make the cast also in the same plane. Okay? The same is relevant for a forward switch cast, where you lift the line in the same plane where you make the forward cast. So two-dimensional thinking. And in the final forward cast, we're always chasing the elusive straight line path of the rod tip. But before we do that, we are repositioning that line from wherever and however, may it be through the air or through the water or even over the rod, which is rod-borne anchor casting, Wave Spey, or now cool cast. But we get to that later. First, I wanted to go with you quickly through the anchor groups and also the nomenclature a little bit. And we start with the waterborne cast first. The easiest waterborne cast is the roll cast. The line has always water contact until it is rolled over the water. The other easy cast is the switch cast, forward switch cast. This is the other easy airborne, or the first airborne anchor cast, if you so want. Straightforward switch cast. As the current is constantly dragging your line downstream, or your line will always, in a riverine ecosystem fishing situation, swing, fly situation, your line will always end downstream on the dangle somehow, fished out. From there you have to reposition that line, and I told you that already. You do this with the help of airborne or waterborne anchored Spey casts. Waterborne casts. There's two different types of waterborne Spey casts. One is a double Spey, like you see it here, and you see here that line is never leaving the water, it's always staying on the water, and the anchor is formed out of the water. And every Spey cast, by the way, can be executed either of the left or the right shoulder. The other one is the snap T. The snap of the snap T makes the line leave the water, but still the anchor, the final anchor, is, as you see here, performed from the water coming into the water going. If you watch this footage here from me Flycasting, you'll see that I always try to mirror these casts. So I have a good shoulder cast and a right shoulder cast and a left shoulder cast. We're not kind of... See, the teachings in casting are a little bit polluted with the thinking of, for example, having here the good side, and here would be the CAG-handed. CAG stands for shit. Yeah, this is the bad, the shit, the dirty side. This is like the 60s thinking of beating right-handers into right-handers. You know what I mean? In a three-dimensional teachings, we need to lose that shit. There is no left and right hand anymore, and don't worry, a fly rod is only a stick that bends, and you can do that with both hands. The only reason why you are not able to do this is that your mental switches and twitches are not on, and that you have probably not tried to do it on a fixed line anchor yet. But you're very well invited to do so. Anyway, you see how I mirror the cast here, and there's a million ways to style on a snap tee and how to do that stuff, but effectively it's important to understand that your line can either be swept into anchor from the air and from the water. And here in this classic, for example, there's another cast called the Perry Poke. If you watch the Perry Poke, that is also a waterborne anchor cast. Why? Because that line is swept into anchor from the water. The airborne alternatives for Speycasts, or the airborne options, I must say, the airborne options for Speycasts are either the snake roll cast, like you see it here, or the single spey. The single spey is a cast that is used by a lot of anglers, very poorly by the way, as soon as it has to change bigger angles of direction, and is also, in my opinion, the most difficult cast to execute properly. That's why I have created another solution to change big angles very precise. That is the ubiquitous rod-borne anchor casting. And I show you the rod-borne anchor now, and it's dual and ambivalent behavior, and its anti-fragility. We're going to that a little bit later when it's getting real rough weather. I show you that then. But here's also the anchor group of the rod-borne anchor cast. Just for you, as a little special treat in here. Now, why is it called rod-borne anchor there? Because the line is repositioned and swept into anchor from the rod. Watch this here. Line anchors on the rod, gets repositioned into D anchor shape and deformation, or deformation and anchor shape, and then the cast is made. But that rod anchor is able to reposition that line in a much more fine-tuned way and precise way within the three-dimensional environment. And that is, if you watch this here, you can either have the rod-borne anchor staying on the water, as in rod-borne waterborne anchored, like in this cast, or you can have it rod-borne airborne, repositioned into anchor, like in this cast here. So you see, in one case, the line comes from the rod, but the anchor or the rest of the proportion of the line stays on the water until it is swept into anchor configuration. And in this other situation here, the cool caster is reinventing, how I call this move, from the rod anchor off the rod, is reinventing that air in the line, that line in the air. Sorry, the cool caster is reinventing that line in the air, so it is repositioned from the air into anchor, which is then a rod-borne airborne anchor. But I wasn't so sophisticated with you so far, and I only say that because some people were not clear about that. I had the impression. And you can also rod-borne Perry poke the line, kind of like you see it here, for example, which is just another way of repositioning, or which is a way which makes it very easy when it's windy, for example, to control that line, because the closer that line is to you, actually, the easier it is to control. But the teachings in fly casting and the adjacent reinforcement, not adjacent, what's the word? Accompanying, being as fast as possible and reinforcing casting panic from this system here can't make you relax, I think, into that Speycasting thing. That is why if you see the rod-borne anchor group for the first time, you get a little bit irritated and confused. And that is because it shows very obvious the three-dimensionality of the cast and of the Speycasting and of the repositioning a line. Because now in Speycasting, if this would be the direction where your line is hanging, in order to make that cast now towards the camera, you need to get your line repositioned and your casting plane readjusted towards the camera, right? To make your forward cast. So you have a line coming from here that needs repositioned, however, so that you can go in this direction. And that type of thinking makes that very hard to do. And back to the straight line path, the elusive straight line path is actually only another approximation. That is, if you think about the true straight line path, if it would be a straight line path, that thing would crash into itself here. So the better way, in my opinion, and the more true way to think this is to think this thing three-dimensionally. Like here in this cone I have prepared for you there. Can you see that? So imagine this being the path of the rod tip. Now you're making only one cast from here to there, yes, but as soon as you're spey casting, you need to reposition that line from somewhere down there up into here, and to make this thing a three-dimensional affair, because you're repositioning line all the time. Or like in fly casting is only often thought in only making the forward cast, but the forward cast is a piece of cake if you can reposition that line properly to from where it's coming from to where you want to have it in order to make your forward cast. That's what a lot of people don't understand in Speycasting. And Flat Earth Society thinking helps not to relax in this context. And stopping and accelerating, and you have to think so much about all these things all the time, and there's such a whole lot of shit to do. So you probably don't deny that fly casting is three-dimensional. And what I keep saying is, or what I teach here in the PRFC and in controlled process casting, see, it's actually really easy. You imagine yourself in the center of the bubble that is the surface, the inside surface of all possible rod tip paths. The shark going around there is indicating that surface of your imaginary bubble. Now, the closer you get that line to you and into the bubble, the easier it is to control that line. And the farther away that line is, the harder it gets to control that line. Full episode Flycasting live. The controlled process caster doesn't have to worry about the loop shapes and about that shit anymore, because he is controlling the process from here to there correct. If you control the process from here to there correctly, you only get the best possible result at all times. So the cool caster doesn't have to worry, or the control process caster doesn't have to worry about the outcome here anymore, because he is putting in the right input. And if you don't have to worry about these loop shapes, how you call it there, the outcome all the time, you can worry more about the energy flows within the system. And instead of keeping it flat in Speycasting, for example, the sum of all possible rod tip paths is a sphere like this here. And you can think of that as your casting move, or your casting cone, if you so want, as the rod tip looping around, making a cast, fishing it out, and then the rod tip is only again at its place where it belongs to. Now, I don't know if you understand this here now, but 3 dimensions, 2 dimensions. And what you actually want is, think this here as a blackboard, a 3-dimensional blackboard that you can paint on with the rod tip on inside of this thing. And think also in terms of energy and of energy flow. Think of it as a 3D cast energy management system.
Snap T input at rod handle.
Snap T output at the rod tip end.
Input over output.
3D configuration. Fly line
Tip
end.
contribution here by Surf Gadget Northeast Coast. Go over to his channel and give that dude a like and a subscribe too. When you're already there, like this here and subscribe to my channel as well. Thank you. And of how and why you need a bend in the rod at all or not, and when it is important in the cast to be fast and when it is important to be slow. Slow the fish down is what you hear a lot from instructors. Why do you think people can't slow down in casting? One of the major problems. But we talk about that a little bit later, because that was already quite a package here, 3-dimensional. So you can also think of that sphere as a little D-stick, man, right in your brain there, right? And the sum of all possible rod tip paths is the outside sphere of your skull. So you want to get a better 3-dimensional impressions of things. You want to get to more lateral thinking. Okay? And to less of this 2-dimensional approach that the classic old teachings are. See, if you compare that, what the classic teachings are doing with what I am doing here, you have a rough comparison of the knowledge that is. And let's integrate that, maybe in the future here, into the system, so that we can get a more holistic model and approach of the casting. Thank you very much for watching, and I know that was probably the weirdest Speycasting lesson you ever had in your life. Please do not forget